decisions for this. For us, this is not Indigenous reconciliation, let alone Indigenous economic reconciliation. Indigenous communities need to be able to decide for ourselves what our energy solutions are and how we want to develop. In closing, we need to be given good information to our community so that our communities can have informed discussions and allow us to have informed decisions. And so kicking off the budget and Indigenous reconciliation, we're excited with this opportunity of getting off of diesel. We need to develop those strategies, and we need as much information and support as possible to achieve, getting off of diesel in the near future. Thank you, Chris.
Thank you so much for joining us, Madeleine. Okay, so we're going to move along now to Dr. James Hansen. I just had the pleasure of spending a few days with Dr. Hansen in Berlin, where we were actually protesting the closure of Germany's remaining nuclear fleet in the context of them continuing to burn coal for the next 17 years, I think at least is fair to say. So kind of the opposite situation of what Canada accomplished with our coal phase out. Dr. Hansen, it is a pleasure to have you. If you could share some remarks, I think we're hoping to hear about your positions on the vital role of nuclear energy in the fight against climate change.
Yeah, thanks for inviting me, Chris. Yeah, I'm really excited about the potential for Canada to be the nation that I've been looking for more than a decade, to show the rest of the world how it's possible to address the climate issue and to do it in a way that is economically beneficial to the nation. At COP26, the Conference of the Parties of the United Nations, which just completed their meeting in Glasgow, there was almost no discussion of the two elephants in the room. There are two things that need to happen if we're going to leave our children and grandchildren a bright future. And the first one is we need to make fossil fuels pay their cost to society. And that's fairly easy to do, but you need to do it not suddenly, but over time. You gradually make the price of fossil fuels include their costs through climate change and human health effects of air pollution and water pollution. And you can do that. And Canada, it looks like they're on the verge of doing this right, of trying the carbon fee and dividend approach. It's still just some of the provinces but the key thing is that the government needs to make sure that it gives the money to the public that's collected from the fossil fuel industry and do it in a way that's very visible. So I think the plan in Canada is to have quarterly dividends, but they need to be explicit and not buried in some income tax return or something. The public needs to see that they're actually getting more money back than they see increased prices of fossil fuels and products made with fossil fuels. The other thing is, the other crucial thing is that we need to have electricity that's carbon free. When we get that, we're most of the way to the solution because we can make liquid fuels from electricity. We can decarbonize our society if we get carbon-free electricity. And renewables will be very helpful in doing that. And they've received a lot of support from governments, Canada, the United States, and other nations for the last few decades. But they need to be complemented with the electricity source that's available 24/7, that's reliable, and that can make the renewables work, the renewables being intermittent. And the only candidate that we have is nuclear power. And it just so happens that Canada is so well situated. Canada has developed its own nuclear technology, the CANDU reactor, which is great. If Japan had CANDU reactors, they would not have had a nuclear accident with the meltdown of the nuclear fuel. It's a great technology, but it needs to continue to advance. The government needs to support it. And if that happens, and if Canada pursues the carbon fee and dividend, then boy, that's the example which the world needs. And its neighbor to the south would notice. And I think we'd be then well on the way to a global solution to the climate problem. So I really hope that the new government will give this the priority that it deserves.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hansen. Okay, so we're going to talk a little bit more, I think, specifically about CANDO and our legacy as a real leader in this technology. It's quite a marvelous piece of Canadian engineering, which not only, again, has delivered our greatest decarbonization contribution, but also actually, for doctors like myself, enables modern healthcare by producing medical isotopes in sufficient quantities to sterilize 40% of the world's single-use medical devices, basically anything plastic in healthcare, your PPE, et cetera. So Diane, if you could come on for a moment and talk to us a little bit about this amazing legacy that we have and the role going forward for CANDO technology.
Je m'appelle Diane Dinario et je travaille dans l'industrie nucléaire. Je suis un ingénieur et je travaille pour CANDO Energy. Ça fait 31 ans que je travaille dans cette industrie et j'ai appris bien des connaissances à propos de l'énergie nucléaire, en particulier les réacteurs CANDO. Les réacteurs CANDO sont bien éprouvés autour du monde. Au Canada, 60% de notre énergie en Ontario parvient des réacteurs CANDO et ils sont sains et ils sont très fiables et ils créent 75 000 emplois, des bons emplois pour les Canadiens, et incluant mon emploi. Je suis très fière des réacteurs CANDO et ce n'est pas juste au Canada, on a autour du monde, on a des réacteurs CANDO en Chine, en Corée du Sud et en Argentine et en Roumanie. Et la Roumanie sont en contact avec, sont en train de planifier pour des nouveaux réacteurs CANDO pour ajouter à leur réseau électrique.
Ok, Diane, merci beaucoup pour nous parler en français. Thank you so much for speaking to us in French for our French language media. So, this, I think we'll kind of wrap up. We're just going to conclude now. Again, really emphasizing the keystone role that nuclear energy, particularly CANDO Nuclear, has played in North America's greatest greenhouse gas reduction. This is something that the Canadian government should be incredibly proud of. And when talking about a just transition, as Diane has just shared with us, this is, again, a sector that is 96% made in Canada. The supply chain is 96% here. It supports a thriving workforce with high quality jobs in the trades and in STEM. And this really is a model going forward for the kind of both clean energy and worker transition that we need. So thank you so much for joining us. We're ready now to take any questions from the media. And you can raise your hand if you'd like to ask a question, and maybe we'll get people to turn on their video now. Okay, I think we're good. So and we have Media Q. We actually have a Media Q representative here. Okay, no questions. Okay. Okay, so this has been recorded and will be going out as well. So it's a very useful resource. Thank you, speakers, for joining us. Yeah, we really appreciate your participation today. Oh, sorry.
Chris, there's a question.
There is Aiden Shamandi. 1 second here. Let me enable your video.
Audio.
Yeah,
Can you hear?
I can't. We can't hear you yet. Oh, here we are. Okay. Hello,
Yeah,
Aiden.
sorry for the appearance, work from home and everything. It's
No problem.
such as that. But yes, thank you for doing this. Apologies, I could not raise my hand. I don't exactly know what was going on, but Zoom and all that. I guess this is one to all of you, but particularly wondering if I could get Dr. Hansen's thoughts on this as well. It's just a general question on why you think there's still such staunch opposition to nuclear power from environmentalists like Guibo that we were talking about.
Yeah, can you hear me?
I can, yes.
Yeah, well, that's a good question, and I found, I had the opportunity to speak to some of the environmental leaders, and they told me there are a few reasons. They would give me reason number one is sort of blah blah blah, and reason number two is blah blah blah, but then they got to the point, and that is that if they did not remain anti-nuclear, they would lose a significant fraction of their donations. And indeed, a significant part of their donations is from the fossil fuel industry. So I think that is the main reason. But what I've noticed in going to college campuses and talking to young people in general, not just college students, is that they're not opposed to nuclear power. And in fact, many of them understand that nuclear has the smallest environmental footprint. And so that it's a continuing problem because of the propaganda, which is just not very accurate. One of the things that's focused on is nuclear waste. Well, nuclear waste is well contained, and it's actually fuel for future reactors because most of the energy is still in the nuclear material that comes out of the reactor. So it's really valuable material. So it's unfortunate that the media continues to put this story forward that nuclear is not environmentally friendly, but in fact, it's the smallest environmental footprint of all the competing energy sources. And since this might be my last question, let me also mention one more thing, which I forgot to say earlier. And that is that there are some Canadian provinces, I understand, that are treating gas as if it's carbon-free. It's not included in the carbon fee, and we really can't gas our young people and future generations. So we really need to take account of the carbon that's in gas, because that alone is enough to make our climate go much warmer.
Thank you so much, Dr. Hansen. We are on the eve of the throne speech, as I was saying, which is a real opportunity to change the narrative. The federal government has made positive signals around nuclear energy. Former Minister of Natural Resources, Seamus O'Regan, has been pretty famously positive about nuclear energy, saying that there is no path to net zero without nuclear energy if we're trying to get there by 2050. Unfortunately, more recently, some of the other ministers who've become prominent in this new government, Stephen Guilbeault, the new Minister of Environment and Climate Change, has a strong record of anti-nuclear activism as a former Greenpeace advocate. And I think Dr. Hansen was giving us some theories as to, you know, the anti-nuclear history of these organizations and why they maintain the positions that they do, but very worrisome that our minister, who's in charge of this critical file, is ignoring the very evidence of our success here in Canada. And not only what we've done in Ontario, what we can model for other high emissions provinces and what we can share with the world, because we have to face Canada was a nation that industrialized fairly early, and we are responsible for a significant portion of the world's emissions. So there's really a role for Canada, for CANDU, for our nuclear technology to be used around the world, and a big opportunity as well economically. Our Minister of Natural Resources, who's replaced Minister O'Regan, Minister Wilkinson, he used to have the environment file, has also been, I would say, a little bit lukewarm on nuclear. The line is that, well, nuclear is going to have to compete, and wind and solar are cheap. But we know that they produce very different kinds of energy. And as Dr. Hansen has said, we need that reliable baseload, especially if we're going to electrify everything, you know, our vehicles, our heating, our cooling. We know that, you know, with extreme weather event, with natural disasters, energy is absolutely essential to keep people alive, such as during the heat dome in British Columbia this summer, when air conditioning was important, especially for elders and other people with health conditions. Wrap it up. I think.
Would it be possible to ask another question?
Absolutely, and if you'd like, yeah.
Okay, great. Yeah. So kind of on the reshaping of the ministry. So you know, O'Regan was very positive. I was at the CNA conference where he made that speech saying there's no future without nuclear. And now obviously Guilbeault has taken over and they've adopted the line of you know, everything's got to compete in the market. But, you know, like you said, Wilkinson doesn't have the same history as Guilbeault. And at COP, Trudeau said, yes, we have to keep investing in all forms of clean energy, nuclear included. He explicitly said that. So I'm just kind of wondering if you guys can get into a little bit more about what you think of that talking point around everything has to compete in the market, and, you know, solar being cheap, which is something that they like to raise a lot.
Yeah, I'm happy to answer that, and I think Madeleine will have something to add as well. You know, it's very concerning, this idea that we should leave our energy transition to the market. Frankly speaking, if the government wasn't engaging and identifying the value of urgently addressing climate change, the market would continue to burn fossil fuels. That the market, you know, the fact that the idea that the government doesn't intervene in energy policy is absolutely false. As I mentioned earlier, with this same government's purchase of a large pipeline, I believe it was 4.5 billion spent on the TMX pipeline, again, owning 10% of the Hibernia oil fields. So there's absolutely a role for government to play in steering our energy policy and in steering our just transition and our green transition. And that's why Canadians for Nuclear Energy is adamant that we have to look at the evidence. And we have had unprecedented success. You know, we've done the heavy lifting for North America, the greatest greenhouse gas reduction, not just in Canada, but in the whole of this northern continent. So we think that the government absolutely needs to take a leading role in this area, needs to invest in a sector that has a 96% made in Canada supply chain. The alternative energies do not meet those high standards of labor and of a made in Canada component. Let me just quickly check the questions here. Okay, and maybe Madeleine, if you can.
Yeah, so maybe I could just add to that, Chris. So, you know, we've looked at what solar and wind can do in our communities. There was a WWF study done with University of Waterloo, and it was determined that while there is some value for solar and wind in some of our Nunavut communities, there's no way that we're able to completely get off of diesel with those two renewable options. So we need to be looking at our full sort of energy options and solutions. Also in our small communities, the marketplace is actually a Crown corporation. And so we're going to need significant assistance from the federal government to actually develop energy strategy on how we can get not only our 25 Nunavut communities off of diesel, but the 170 plus Indigenous communities across Canada that are currently on diesel. So that is going to require looking at, everything from the environmental considerations, the population growth, what is nearby, are there mines, can there be cost sharing with those major developments, with the provinces, the territories, the municipalities. We need to be smart about how this is going to happen, which means that we're going to have to, get people in the room, have these assessments done, and look at how we can achieve the ultimate goal and solution, which is to get our Northern and our Indigenous communities that are on diesel off of diesel.
Absolutely. And such an important role there for, micromodular reactors. It is important, I think, to stress that, the lukewarm signals towards nuclear in Canada so far have been in the form of support for a roadmap and an SMR action plan, which we support and think is very important. However, the government has completely neglected this CANDO program that we have. And the reality is, again, with electrification, with the need to 2 or 3 times our grid capacity, we are going to need a large number of large reactors to do just what we did in Ontario. So places like Alberta are really, I think, a good place for us to move next. This is a sector and an area, a province in our country that has an enormous number of skilled tradespeople, from pipe fitters, boilermakers, welders, et cetera, whose economic prospects have been hit hard by the changes, I'd say, in the tar sands and the fossil fuel industry. So that's another really important point. Diane, we should maybe get another couple words in French here. Or English if you prefer, but if you could maybe speak a little bit more to that role for large nuclear as well as small nuclear, and your thoughts on that.
Well, both have a place, but we definitely need a lot more large nuclear reactors, because in areas with large populations, the small modular reactors aren't quite the solution. But in remote communities, they are definitely part of the consideration that is needed. So they both work in different ways, but in large populations, you need the economy of scale to be able to deploy a lot of energy to a large number of population without taking up too much land and
Yeah, I think that's a very good point. We're poised to lose the Pickering nuclear generating station, which again has provided an enormous contribution to the coal phase that we're luckily are refurbishing our CANDO reactors at Darlington and Bruce Power. However, the closure of Pickering again is going to erase 1/3 of the emissions gains we've made as a country. It's going to raise Canada's national emissions by 1%. 1% maybe doesn't sound like a lot, but when you think about the entire country. So our organization does call for a refurbishment of Pickering and or a replacement with an equal output or a greater output even of traditional CANDO reactors. The SMR plan is to replace, or is to take Pickering offline and bring 1 SMR online by, I think, 2028, and that will resemble 1/10 of the output of Pickering. So if this is a climate emergency, the fact that one of our cleanest grids in the country is going to be taking a massive step backwards, burning gas, going from 7% gas to 30% of gas on our grid, that's absolutely unacceptable. And as Dr. Hansen was saying, our carbon tax is not being applied well here. Only 10% of Ontario gas plant emissions are actually going to be taxed. So we have some major issues in climate policy that need to be dealt with. We hope that we've drawn attention to that with this press conference. We're very honored to have this all-star panel we've been able to assemble. Thank you so much, Madeleine, Diane, and James for making the time for us today. I'm sorry myself if I've been a little bit sleepy. I just came off of a night shift and I'm going on about half an hour of sleep. But it's been a real pleasure having you all here. I'm just going to check anything else. Yes, if there's any other questions.
I would just ask if I could shoot over some email questions because I don't want to take up, a ton
Absolutely.
more.
No, we're happy to follow up again. We will be, broadcasting this again to other media outlets. So we're very open to more questions. You can go to c4ne.ca, C number 4 or numeral 4 ne.ca, and get in touch with us there. But yes, absolutely. We're happy to take questions.
Yep. Thank you guys. Really appreciate it.
Merci à tous et merci pour nous joindre pour cette conférence. On se voit plus tard. Thank you, everybody.
Thanks.
Good. Okay.
Thank you so much. Thanks.